Okay, I'm ready to keep going. And what I'm guessing was his mic drop moment. Robert cited 2 Samuel 11:11 that says, quote, flat earth in the Matthew Henry's Bible from 1537. However, yet again, Roberts did not seem to think that people would check his work, because that verse is talking about a level plot of land where earth is referring to the dirt on the ground. I checked the translation in parallel, and this was confirmed. I checked dozens of translations, in fact, in parallel, and they all gave one of 5 versions. I chose the most recognizable translation from each group to represent that version, lined up against the Matthew Henry. And honestly, if you read the preceding verses in the Matthew Henry and all the translations, there is still no confusion about what was being talked about. Furthermore, Roberts failed to provide the context, because I assume that it would be then disregarded by any rational person. See, in ancient warfare, they sought out a wide, flat area where they could fight. All right? And that is what is being referenced in the report by General Uriah on the location of the encampment of King David's army. And then I went even further by consulting the Matthew Henry Bible commentary to the Matthew Henry Bible. On this, I looked up this pericope in it, and there is no mention of this flat earth Meshuggah. He has done this so much that I propose calling this the Roberts Principle, making an erroneous claim and citing a source, assuming that no one will check. Now, Roberts claimed that Isaiah 40:4-5 is a flat earth prophecy, and that it correlates to Revelation 1:7. In reality, it is Isaiah using prophetic language to describe wiping the earth clean of features like leveling mountains and filling valleys, all right, putting everything on the same level. But it really has nothing to do with a flat earth. One could do the same thing with a basketball, leveling the grippy bits and filling the grooves. It can happen with any shape, and it doesn't have to be a flat disc. And it is not considered connected to Revelation 1:7, but it is connected to Luke 3:4-6, parallel Matthew 3:3, and Mark 1:3. And this is how you properly cite synaptic verses, sir, just in case. And now, if you can believe it, Roberts really went off the rails, if he was ever on them to begin with, and I mean this relative to everything else so far. He just says, quote, creation worshippers, and in parentheses, Helio-centric Sun-god Worshippers. So, I'm guessing that the following pericopes are against those believing in the reality of a globe Earth and the heliocentric model. The pericopes really have nothing to do with flat Earth or the shape of the Earth, not even close. But I did due diligence, and I will highlight just how off in left field Roberts is, considering how he himself is actually distributing ancient Egyptian polytheistic cosmology. Well, let's get this over with so we can move on to the good bits. Consider all of this so far, the eating your veggies portions of this reaction. There's nothing for me here to really react to, so it's time to sub in the chaplain. If I must, this boy needs to go to the remedial Sunday school. Alright, Deuteronomy 4:19 is actually speaking against astrology and astrologers. The Bible is against all forms of fortune telling, in fact. Maybe Roberts mistook that with astronomy, because that is very different. And in context, this is about the commandment prohibiting the worship of idols and graven images. At this point, I should warn the Bible thumpers that if they venerate the Bible too much, they turn the Bible into an idol. So yeah, it maybe has already happened to some, but it's never too late to repent. Deuteronomy 7:13 refers to the Decalogue and the commandment prohibiting holding other gods above God. In context, it's directed against the pagan pantheons, which, ironically, the Bible misusing flerfers are actually doing this with their pushing of ancient Egyptian polytheistic cosmology. 2 Kings 23:5 is a description of King Josiah's reforms based upon the discovery of the book of Deuteronomy while renovating the temple. They found it in a wall, which was directed against the Canaanite pantheon, especially Baal, and Yahweh's ex-consort Asherah, that's the stick in the ground. Also the consolidation of worship in Jerusalem, the whole only one temple thing, reversing the policies of King Manasseh. Right, Jeremiah 8:2 refers to the ancient Near East practice of disinterring corpses of leaders when a treaty is violated. You can see this further in Josiah's reforms doing this. He desecrating Bethel, the location of the Samaritans' temple in the northern kingdom of Israel, erected in opposition to the temple in Jerusalem that was located in the southern kingdom of Judah. Remember, only one temple allowed. All right, buckle up for this one. Acts 7:42-43 quotes the Septuagint translation of Amos 5:25-27. And it's a review of ancient Israel's disobedient relationship with God. All right, there's a lot of pronouns and historical references. All right, we got the tent of Moloch. The tent is the sacred space, like the tabernacle. And Moloch was an indigenous Canaanite deity whose worship included child sacrifice at the Tophet, or fireplace, in the valley of Hinnom, also known as Gehenna in Hebrew, which we now call Gehenna, the metaphorical representation of hell, starting during the intertestamental period, the time between the Old and New Testament, and is used explicitly in this way. Rephan is a reference to Saturn, the pagan, not the planet, but the pagan deity. Images made to worship, again, the commandment against graven images. Remove you beyond Babylon is referencing the Babylonian exile, where Babylon conquered Judah and transported a whole bunch of people out of Judah and spread them out in Babylon. So yeah, this is what Roberts chose to cite to prove a flat earth. Alright, we got Acts 14:8-20 is the story of Paul and Barnabas in the Greek city of Lystra, considered to be a gullible backwater, and they were mistaken for Zeus and Hermes, similar to the story in Ovid's Metamorphosis. But anyway, this episode is usually portrayed comically, like something out of the life of Brian, except for the last two verses, in which involves stones being thrown in the direction of the apostles, which is also like the life of Brian. All right, back to the pastor to react. I need a drink. Hey, not yet. Roberts claimed, and this is a direct quotation, this is Porthos, by the way. Lucifer, quote, Lucifer / Satan's conspiracy to unite the world against Jesus' throne, which is above the firmament. He cited 4 pericopes. Oh, you're happy, kitty. He cited 4 pericopes none of which have anything to do with the firmament, or Jesus, or a conspiracy. Kind of like the joke about how the Holy Roman Empire was not holy, Roman, or an empire. He cited the Tower of Babel, a psalm sung at royal coronations, a mocking dirge celebrating the violent death of an Assyrian tyrant, that's right, that tried to displace God, and the Archangel Michael leading the angels to defeat the devil and demons at Armageddon. This is a really happy kitty here. I had noticed another pattern at this point, that sarcasm goes completely over Roberts' head. And to be clear, it's the most sarcastic one is the dirge. His last claim, before we get to the good stuff, was a bunch of citations about the inerrancy of the Bible, and has no place in a discussion of non-religious stuff. And the way it was framed was threatening and manipulative. In my opinion, I would say that Roberts is venerating the Bible to the point of idolatry if he wasn't disrespecting it so much. This is why people are so put off by Christianity. People like Roberts. And the same goes for Thompson. Malarkey like this. I can't see. The only real difference between them and the Westboro Baptists is volume level. Or between them and Kenneth Copeland and Joel Osteen is audience size. They are bilking people for money, and I remind them that the only time that Jesus lost his temper was when the money changers were bilking the believers outside the temple. Hey, you gonna settle down, buddy? Alright, with the tripe dispensed with, we have the important stuff, including the so-called firmament. Alright, what's up, buddy? You like my... What are you doing? Alright, with the tripe dispensed with, we have the important stuff, including the so-called firmament. There are a handful of verses that that scholars recognize as the commonly misused passages for flerf's arguments. They are these: Genesis 1:6, Job 38:5 and 12-14, Psalm 104:2, Isaiah 11:12, 40:22 and 42:5, and Revelation 7:1 and 27. Some of these have been addressed. Yeah, want to sniff that? Some have already been addressed, but I tried to hold off until this section. So let's go through Roberts' related claims with special attention given to those verses. While the Bible does not explicitly state what the shape of the earth is, Genesis 1:9 suggests a sphere. All the land and water gathered in one spot, all together. Geometrically, this only happens on a sphere. Therefore, you want to sniff this too? Therefore, Genesis 1 implies a round earth. Now, for the next three claims, the key pericopes are from the books of Job and Isaiah. And of course, Roberts added more of his flat earth foolishness. Anyway, Chaplain, give us a brief introduction to those two books to help everyone understand them and the stuff that Roberts ignored. Job opens the wisdom section of the Tanakh, or Old Testament, and its central theme is the possibility of disinterested righteousness, and asks whether virtue depends on a universe that operates by the principle of reward and punishment. It's in the form of a poetic drama, and it's not considered something that actually happened. Calm down, Nathan Thompson, let me finish. It is a lesson. All right, think of it as a really long parable, but with more drama and enough sass to make Dame Maggie Smith blush. Job is arguing with friends or neighbors, getting very sarcastic and self-righteous, and then God gives him a talking to, setting him straight. Isaiah opens the prophets section and is one of the major prophets, which is based on the length of the book, not its importance. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel are all long enough to get their own scrolls, while the rest of the prophets can all fit together on one scroll. Isaiah operated in the southern kingdom of Judah, and his prophecies were against Judah's various enemies, the northern kingdom of Israel, Assyria, and Babylon. It also deals with the restoration after the Babylonian exile. Prophetic language is used, and it's figurative and poetic, full of metaphors and creative descriptions. As we have seen, Roberts has been ignoring the forms, taking it amiss or misstating figurative language, and taking idioms literally. He's like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy in this way. And to be clear, I am using a simile. I do not literally mean that Roberts is actually Drax. Just to be clear, because, you know. Alright, let's get back to this. Pastor, claim. Earth measurements unknown. I wish you could see Athos right now. He's being very cute and showing his belly. Claim, Earth measurements unknown. He cited Job 38, 4-5. God is sassily putting Job in his place after Job was lamenting, whining at God. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? See how it sounds in its proper context? Hold on. Athos, don't eat that. Good boy. God is God, and Job is a lowly human, so knock it off. The same with Job 38:18. And taking measuring line means a flat earth and not a sphere is an overinterpretation. Lines can be straight or curved. In fact, if we engage in some wordplay, in nautical terms, a line is a rope, which is how one used to measure how many knots a ship was traveling. Also, you measure the diameter of a sphere with a straight-edged ruler. All right, Jeremiah 31:37, an oracle of salvation using the language of hymns. The part Roberts cited was actually about how the unfathomable character of heaven and earth guarantees Israel's continuation. All right, and then Proverbs 25:3. This was a clever edit by Roberts, or an inept one. Verses 2 and 3 together form a simile, but Roberts only cited half of it. It is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings to search things out, like the heavens for height, like the earth for depths, so the mind of kings is unsearchable. Sounds more like it advocates for the pursuit of science and knowledge. You see, it's not just what is cited, but what isn't. That's Hermeneutics 101. Claim. Earth measured with a line, not a curve, citing Job 38:45, 4-5 again. As we have already noted, it has nothing to do with an actual measuring line, and even if it did, a line can have any shape, and a line can be stretched over a curve, like a fishing reel or a thread on a bobbin. This is an underhanded equivocation in my opinion. Hey Chaplain, you're up again. Alright. Finally, we have the biggest issue to deal with. The so-called firmament. That is one way that the Hebrew word rakia has been translated into English. But it also means expanse. According to the HarperCollins Bible Dictionary, for its entry on the firmament, it starts with, "You need to imagine a flat earth." So that's funny. It establishes right off that it is imaginary. So the firmament is the concept that there's a hard dome above us and enclosing a flat earth, holding back water, and is a real physical boundary. So I challenge you, put expanse in place of firmament when you read these verses and consider which word makes more sense. Where did this firmament idea come from? I know that as a kid, the firmament never came up in Sunday school, and without someone defining it like that, I assumed that it meant the sky, to infinity and beyond. If one starts off with the presumption of a solid dome, one will read that into the text, confirmation bias. Alright, so, back in the 3rd century BC, the Egyptian pharaoh requested a Greek translation of the Tanakh. So as the story goes, 70 Jewish scribes went off, each in seclusion, and did the translation. And when they finished, they gathered to compare notes and were surprised to find that everyone's translations matched exactly. Now I know how this sounds, and I remember a rabbi at university said in response to this, when you have 2 rabbis, you get 3 opinions. Anyway, the scribes were influenced by Egyptian cosmology, while in the ancient Near East, to them, it was an expanse. And through the study of comparative religion, we know that none of their neighbors in the ancient Near East thought of it as a dome either. However, the ancient Egyptians believed that the earth was a flat square with mountains around the edge that supported a dome. So, once Alexander came through and making Greek the language to learn, and the Ptolemies ruled Egypt, they made Alexandria an intellectual center, attracting to it the scribes and their exposure to that belief and its influence. And the Septuagint was initially meant for the Greek-speaking Egyptians, and then it went out from there. So we start with the Masoretic text. The original Hebrew rakia was translated then into the Greek as stereoma, which had a connotation for hardness. And then Jerome comes along with his Latin translation published in AD 405 using the word firmamentum, meaning strong or steadfast support. And then the translators of the King James Bible just transliterated firmamentum into firmament. It's like basing an entire worldview on a game of biblical telephone. Roberts began the firmament section with, quote, "The," one in parentheses, "firmament / dome / vaulted dome and expanse created there and upon where God's throne exists," end quote. He needs a remedial English class as well, it seems. At least there are no space commas. He then listed off a bunch of verses and then expounded on them. He started with a psalm, but let's start at the beginning with Genesis 1, 6-8, so we can understand what is going on with this firmament thing. Roberts said, With understanding the properties of water, it requires a physically hardened surface to keep it contained. Thus, a dome/firmament is not only logical, but is within the proper context of Scripture. Not really. Roberts is presupposing a flat Earth, a bit of his confirmation bias, which would need a barrier to keep the waters from falling off, instead of gravity, which is how it's actually done. Now, you see, some flerfs think that Antarctica is actually an ice wall manned by NASA personnel with guns. Anyway, I've come to understand Roberts' methodology and process by slogging through this mess, and so I find it laughable that he is suddenly considering the context when he has demonstrably not so far. Also, that he does not understand the properties of water when he had issues with ice being water earlier. He also seems to have forgotten that clouds, fog, and humidity are all water in gaseous form, nor gravity for that matter. In my opinion, once you apply the Deuteronomical test to this pericope, expanse fits better and makes more sense with what we know about our world and what has been proven true by science through our God-given gifts. According to the Encyclopedia of Biblical Difficulties, which is one of the strictest literalists I've ever read, it says that this pericope describes the formation of an expanse to separate condensed moisture on the Earth's surface from those suspended in the sky. Sounds like clouds to me. It also states that the rakia does not really mean a beaten-out canopy. Remember, there was a lot of parallelism going on in the ancient Near East with their writings, and none of them taught this notion in their concept of the sky. And so it just simply means a stretched out expanse. It further supported this conclusion about the firmament with Isaiah 42:5. Which Roberts cited in his initial list, but seems that he skipped in his explanation section, though he did mention it in an earlier claim, to be fair. In that pericope, the cognate form raka, number 7554, could not beat out or stamp out in connection with metalworking because of the parallelism with nata, number 5186, meaning to extend, as in curtains or tent cords, and the reference to the earth produces sitsa, number 6631, and that this word always refers to plants and animals. So rakia can only mean an expanse without a connotation of a hard metal plate. To add to this, there is consistency between Isaiah 40:22 and Psalm 104:2, both of which speak of stretching out the heavens. About the stretching, it too used the word that is connected with being spread out like a tent. Think about it. A tent has 3 dimensions. It can go out. And to complete the metaphor, heaven can keep going out like the tent stretching out. And then we have the Hebrew word for heavens, 8064, Shemayim, literally heavens. However, in Genesis 1:8, God explicitly calls the expanse heaven. And so equated rakia with Shemayim. And if the Hebrew word used for heaven is not rakia, but Shemayim, 8064, literally heavens. However, in Genesis 1:8, God explicitly calls the expanse heaven, and so equated rakia with Shemayim. If the stretched out nature of the rakia is what is intended, then expanse would be a more accurate and better translation than firmament. And in the context of Genesis 1, it makes clear that Moses intended Rakia to be understood as sky, the atmosphere and heavens or space above earth. In fact, in modern Hebrew, Rakia is the word used for sky and has no connotation at all of hardness. Well, that should be that. But let's be thorough and professional with this, to leave no doubt about this list of hokum. And besides, how he tried to support a firmament displayed the same lack of ability, academic standards, and honesty he has so far displayed. In fact, his methods may have even gotten worse, if you can believe it. Now back to the pastor.